Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours, the official reboots of Office Hours Live. This is season 3, episode 1, and I'm so excited to be rejoining everyone. And thank you so much for tuning in today. We have a great guest lined up, and we're just going to have an awesome chat, and I'm really excited for it. So, as always, I want to know, where are you tuning in from? Tell us in the chat, where in the world are you coming in from? And would love to hear. Usually Office Hours boasts an international uh, um, audience, so I'm curious to see if that's the case tonight. All right, so anyway, I'm just really excited about tonight's chat and would love to introduce the expert that we have tonight, and that is Tiffany Uman. And she helps ambitious professionals fast track their career success and crush their career goals. I love that, crush their career goals in record time, including promotions, our topic of tonight, new jobs, and salary raises. And I was browsing Tiffany's website earlier, and Tiffany has worked with clients from 15 different countries and also from a whole slew of amazing brands her clients have worked for or go on to work with, including like Disney, Airbnb, Facebook, Walmart, L'Oreal, and Nestle, like huge world-renowned brands. So that is super cool. But what makes Tiffany like the expert on promotions is she herself, before she became a career strategy coach, she earned 7 promotions in less than 10 years in Fortune 500. So we gotta learn from her. So without further ado, I'm going to add Tiffany to the stream. Tiffany, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm giggling in the back from that beautiful intro. Thank you. I hope I'm not blushing too much.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, I mean, I was like, I knew when we first or when we reconnected not long ago, I was like, okay, we need to talk about promotions, but I didn't realize that you yourself had been promoted 7 times in 10 years, and that's like so impressive.
Oh,
and so
thank you.
Like you're the person to consult with on promotions. So is there anything that I missed in the intro that you'd like everyone to know?
I mean, I think you covered most of it. I would just reiterate the fact that I've walked that walk, right? So I think what makes my approach very distinct when it comes to supporting you all in your career growth is the fact that I've done it myself. I'm coming from the employee side. I've navigated it all, and I've really packaged together my best practices from my own learning, some of my mistakes as well, so that you don't have to go into those same trap or hold yourself back in any way. So it's definitely coming from a place of firsthand experience, of empathy, of understanding. So I'm really excited for tonight's session.
Me too. Can't wait to learn all the things that you learned along the way. So, and what you teach your clients. So I just want to say hello to Chris. Thanks for tuning in, Chris. Chris is tuning in from Beaver Creek, Ohio. But Madeline from Little Rock, Arkansas. Hello, Madeline. Martha from Katy, Texas. Welcome, Martha. Nice to see you. Caroline from Victoria, BC. And Maria from Lima, Peru. So very international audience tonight. Love it. Yes, absolutely. And so just a reminder to anyone, or just to let anyone know, or everyone know, if you're tuning into Office Hours for the first time, please do ask any questions that come up for you that you'd like to ask Tiffany. Please ask them in the chat. So on the chat function on YouTube, or in the comments function on LinkedIn. So please do feel free to ask anything that's on your mind regarding promotions or what we're talking about. So let's dive into some questions about promotions. I know a lot of people are thinking about making career changes or staying at their employer and making a career change by way of promotion. So how do we know if we're actually ready for a promotion?
This is the $1 million question, Kamara. And honestly, I find that notion of readiness a really important one. I mean, on the one hand, it's actually not so much about knowing if we're ready, so much as actually getting the alignment of our readiness level with the key decision makers who are influencing that promotion, that career move, right? And I see this happen a lot as even a bit of a mistake or a blind spot that can slow someone's progress, where they might be convinced that they are ready, but in the reality of things, they're not necessarily being perceived as ready. And so that alignment is even more important than our own perception of our readiness level. Now, that's not to say that you can't influence it. It's important to make sure that the right types of next steps and dialogues and continuity there is happening so that you can actually get there faster. But that alignment piece when it comes to readiness level is something that's really important to pick up on, especially with the people who are going to be influencing that decision most. And, something I often like to say when it comes to this, to put it in perspective, is that you can be the hardest worker out there, right? You can be amazing at your job. You can be meeting all of your objectives and all of that. But if the right people don't actually know the value that you're bringing, those people who are influencing the internal career moves, it can really be overlooked. And I never want that to happen for anyone. So that's just a really important distinction when it comes to knowing if we're ready. First, you'll recognize it in yourself, most likely from how you're delivering in your role, if you're getting certain feedback along the way, but then that validation and the alignment is critical.
So how do we confirm that validation and alignment with the key decision makers?
Yeah. So feedback is a huge one. Obviously, your boss is going to be a key decision maker in the sense that they're the ones that are outright evaluating you, correct? So that's sort of stakeholder number one, where if you don't have their buy-in, if you don't have their alignment, it's likely going to make things a little bit more challenging to get alignment from anybody else, especially more senior or possibly in the internal HR teams if they're very involved in internal promotion conversations and moves. So definitely you want to be able to have and establish a continuity of dialogue with your boss to know, are you on the right track? Is what you're doing what's actually going to help you get to those next steps? And obviously we could go a lot deeper into this, but that's just kind of the top level overview. That would be step one. And then I would say, make sure that you're keeping your eyes and ears open around what the internal structure is like and who's typically involved. Looking back at my own career, Kamara, in terms of promotions within my Fortune 500, and it was a very hierarchical organization, I realized that, my boss wasn't the only decision maker. There was other people in the mix that had a big level of influence. So I needed them to get to know me. So that then goes hand in hand with giving yourself opportunities for exposure, for visibility, even having active conversations with your boss around getting that type of visibility too, so that you can get that proper connection with those other individuals who can see your value firsthand.
That's such a great point because, especially for those of us who are working in, say, the larger companies that are kind of heavily matrixed, we would run into that situation likely where there are multiple decision makers in our that have a say in our destiny, so to speak.
100%. 100%. I often say it that you need to establish a really well-rounded support system. And that sounds nice and it sounds kind of easy to do, but in reality, it takes effort. It takes intentional effort. And especially in a remote work setting, which is the majority of what we're experiencing these days, it does take that extra level of intention to build up the right supporters for you. And this is exactly the type of thing that I coach on, to know how to go about that. What are those steps that you should be putting into place? But at least knowing, especially from tonight's session, that be very aware. Don't just rely on your work to speak for itself. There's a bit of a bigger picture here, especially if you want to bring a level of proactivity towards making your promotions happen faster.
That makes so much sense. So what would be, if we need to influence so many people, what would kind of be the first step in that influence or having that? You mentioned the continuity of dialogue. What would be that first step?
Initiating the conversation. So one thing that is often a miss amongst many professionals that I see is that they're putting a little bit too much onus on other people to initiate these types of dialogues, whether it's their boss, whether it's HR, whether it's just internal structure changes. They're kind of expecting things to just naturally fall into place, or they might have an internal timeline of when promotions happen. So they just kind of rest on that, expecting it to happen. but there's actually a lot that can be done in terms of those first steps. And that's why step number one is really initiating the dialogue, initiating and letting, especially your boss as that first important stakeholder, know where you're at. Let them know what you want, right? And it's about being pretty explicit about it. Don't be shy. Don't let them assume things of you. Let them understand in your own words what kind of progression you're looking for so that you can get their buy-in. The sooner that you can start initiating these conversations, one, it reduces a lot of the overwhelm or intimidation factor, because at the end of the day, your boss's role, one of their key roles, is to help you succeed and evolve. So the more that they know where you're coming from, the better they can support you. So if you wait too long and kind of miss that step without the continuity, you can actually get into a lot of gaps along the way that would otherwise have helped you get there faster. So that's definitely step one, I would say.
That's a great point, and a great first step. I have so many questions that are like flying around in my head, and I want to make sure that the audience's questions are answered too.
Sure.
Because I have so many questions, I'm worried I'm going to miss asking you a question. So please do make sure, those of you tuning in, if you have a question for Tiffany, like I do, like a million questions, please write it in the chat on YouTube or the comments on LinkedIn, and we will make sure to get to it. And I just wanted to touch base with a couple folks who are tuning in. So hi, Andy. Thanks for tuning in. Andy's tuning in from Houston. We've got Mohammed from Windsor. We've got Pablo from Chile. We've got Paul from Austin, and then some folks on LinkedIn, Houston, Toronto, NYC. Love it.
Wow, what a good group. Fantastic.
And Fabio from Brazil, and then Bronca from Ohio. It's so international. I love it.
Me too. This is incredible. Yeah. Thank you all for joining tonight and spending some time with Kamara and myself.
Well, and thank you, Tiffany, for sharing all of your insights, because this is just on so many professionals' minds. And yeah, I have so many questions myself, and I want to make sure that I ask the right questions. So we've talked about making our kind of career growth intention known. And then my curiosity is, what if we have a boss who is a little less than supportive, or we have a gut feeling they'll be a little less than supportive? How would we navigate that?
Yeah. So I would say the first step there is understanding why they're not as supportive. There's a few different facets where that could stem from. Maybe part of their lack of support might be the fact that you're so good that they don't want to lose you, and they're not ready to have a gap on their team. Like, it could very much be from that. And it's not coming from a malintent. It's more that they're not ready to let you go. So that's kind of one thing that often happens. Another could be, let's say they're more of a toxic boss, where they aren't really looking out for your best interests. So that's a bit of a different approach. And then there's also just the boss that is a bit hands-off, that themselves don't necessarily go out of their own way for their own growth. So they don't really know how to do that for their own team. And I've seen this amongst even many of my clients, these different scenarios. I've witnessed it myself. So I would say those are kind of the three like big buckets as to why they might not be supportive. So, for that first one, if you're getting a sense that they don't really want to lose you yet, part of it is helping ease that conversation, helping them see that this plan doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but that it is important for you and your growth, and that you want to position yourself for success and the team up for success, so you can actually build your business case in a way that will help them ease up and have more support, because they don't feel alone in that. They feel that, okay, there's a plan in place. We can work towards this. Hence, again, the importance of continuity, so that you don't just spring something on them and then expect an instant buy-in on their part. Right. The toxic boss is a little bit of a different situation, where there's just general things that need to be addressed, even underlying, aside from the promotion, but more likely the working dynamic. And if you are really getting a sense that they are blocking, that they are kind of sabotaging, this is likely where you need to elevate that, especially if you've tried addressing it directly with them and are getting no kind of immediate response. This is where likely involving someone more senior, possibly your boss's boss, possibly involving HR, might be a good approach to see if switching to a different team, maybe where the dynamic would be more effective for your growth internally is best. Of course, if it's something that's encouraged by the company culture and there is just toxicity all around, then it just begs the question if this is an organization that you actually want to grow with, or if jumping ship somewhere else might be a wiser move. And then that way you could still favor your progression. And then for the final piece, if your boss doesn't necessarily know how to support you best, this is where, and it's a bit of an interesting perspective I share, but you almost have to spoon feed them. You have to help them support you best. And if they don't know the way, then you have to almost give it to them on a silver platter. Prepare the plan that you want. Give them the explicit direction of what you're looking for. Lead in with conversations of other decision makers about maybe understanding what those next steps look like, what that clarity of internal career path can be, what that trajectory should look like, etc. So you might need to take even more proactivity in your own hands. And it's not out of disrespect to your direct boss. It's more to help them support you best in those next steps when they're not quite sure how to support you directly in that.
I like that you frame it as help them support you. For me, in my mind, I'm like thinking it's doing their work for them.
I mean, it is in a way, but it's to benefit you, right? So that's where at least the one what's in it for you is worthwhile, because and it's not to say that you're going to have to do that forever, but it's to just sort of rip that Band-Aid off and start taking more of a proactive stance versus relying on them to do what they need to do when they're maybe too slow or they're not good at their time management. So they're not giving you good direction and where you should be orienting your time and energy on what matters. So this is what I mean by trying to really understand where that lack of support is coming from to then best put in place your course of action to follow.
That's great. That's great. That's such great advice. And we have a question from someone on LinkedIn that is very timely because we're talking about that starting that dialogue about your intention for career growth. So I'm gonna, just before I get into the question, I'm sorry for the folks on LinkedIn. I can't see your names for some reason. LinkedIn won't show us, so I'm not ignoring your names. They just won't show us. So thank you for the question, LinkedIn user. Do you mention, Tiffany, your intention for a promotion at performance review time?
So my answer to this is I generally recommend not waiting until performance review time. And I'm going to explain why in a second. But generally, when I talk about building that continuity of dialogue, you want to start it sooner. And this is going to depend on how far you are into your role, how far you are in your company. So there's not really a rule of thumb. But the general rule of thumb I will say that I'm a big advocate for is don't wait to bring it up for the very first time in a performance review. Even if, let's say, you've been in your role for 6 months, still don't wait to bring it up. There's seeds that you can plant along the way, because by the time you're in a performance review, those are typically moments where the decisions are being made. Either maybe budgets are being finalized around salary raises tied to promotions, or internal decisions have been made around what those promotions are going to be looking like for distribution. So if you only wait until then, and let's say there's things you still need to work on to get the promotion, well, then you might have just delayed yourself another 6 months to a year unintentionally. So this is why I'm a big, big believer of not necessarily waiting until that time. That said, you can absolutely still use the performance review more as like an alignment that this is following through. And if there's anything outstanding, of course, that can be addressed. But you don't want to wait until that moment to bring it up for the first time. That's a big no-no in my books.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I'm guilty as charged, waiting for performance review time when I was in corporate to ask for a promotion. And yeah, it didn't work out.
No, but you're not alone, Kamara. Yeah. And I've gotten this question a lot from my own clients or my audience too, where they might explain, well, my organization's really firm on like only talk about this stuff in performance reviews. Like they don't encourage you to talk about it outside of a performance review. And even if that's the case, fine, but you can still ask the proper questions to your boss without saying promotion, but make sure that you're making it clear your next step that you want to hit by that performance review or by a certain timeline, so that at least what's happening in the meantime is definitely going to help your case to get there. So that's what I mean, that, take everything with a grain of salt. If there's going to be internal rigid timelines in terms of performance distribution, promotion distribution, I should say, or salary raises. Don't just take that at face value. There's still things you can do, which comes back to that proactivity I was mentioning, to help you get ahead of some of these initiatives that's going to help your cause.
Love it. And I love that it's another P word to go with promotion. Proactive promotions.
Yes.
It works.
Proactivity is key. Yeah. It's really like the secret sauce. It just what's going to help you really stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. And I just want to check in with a few folks in the audience. Hello, Narav, tuning in from Guelph. And hello, Sweta. Thanks for joining us. Sweta Regmi is also tuning in. So kind of piggybacking on the performance review question, another question we have here is, would after the new year, or I guess after the fiscal year ends as well, would be included in this question. Would it be a good time to bring it up, or?
Okay, so I'm actually going to preface this question with something that I wanted to mention earlier, and it slipped my mind. So what's really important when it comes to promotions and timing to bring it up is to get a good sense as to typically when promotions are happening in your organization. And this isn't, again, it's not a one size fits all model. So for instance, maybe for a certain organization, it's actually prior to the new year, prior to the end of the fiscal year, that those decisions are pretty much being finalized. So if you wait until after, you kind of miss the boat once again, right? So this can very much come through talking actively with your boss, getting a better sense as to what those next steps are. And it's not about demanding a promotion then and there. It's more about informing yourself so you know what kind of timeline are you working with. Maybe it's even getting a sense as to how long they typically recommend being in a certain role before moving to the next step. And once again, it's not about taking that at face value and saying, okay, well, I guess I have to wait 2 years before I move. There's things that you could certainly do to accelerate. And that's, again, a huge focus for me in my coaching to help you make sure there's no gap standing in your way to make it happen. But this is that overall knowledge of when are those promotions typically happening. And then you can definitely work your timing more proactively in advance of that. So possibly it's the new year, maybe it's midway through a year. Maybe there's certain moments where your HR team is regrouping on these kinds of decisions. So you want to make sure you're getting ahead of that. So definitely speaking with your boss as a first step is really important to get a sense as to when those types of things are happening.
So really what I'm hearing is you need to know your organization pretty well.
It helps. I mean, we talk about internal politics, right? I mean, I think everyone who's tuning in tonight, if they're working in a company setting, it's kind of inevitable. Again, a big focus for me on how to navigate that, because no one ever gives you a rule book on how to handle these kinds of things. But especially when it's controlling your growth, right? I want you all to feel in control of your growth. And you definitely have a role to play in this. And there's a lot of things that you can put on your side to make it happen. And definitely, to Kamara's point, knowing those inner workings is only going to help you.
That's great. Great points all around. So one thing that I think is top of mind for both of us, especially this week, given that yesterday was International Women's Day, is that there is a significant discrepancy between how much men are promoted and how much women are promoted. And the stat that I last read is that women are promoted 14% less than men. That even seems like a low or a smaller gap than I was expecting. So like, why do you think this discrepancy exists between men and women being promoted?
Yeah. And it breaks my heart when I hear this. And it sucks that we still, live in a world where this type of inequity is still happening, but it's the reality. And I want to help everyone push past this and just smash those glass ceilings, right? And so I would say, especially from my own observation and from my clients that I work with, where a lot are female professionals, there's certainly things that we can do in our control that's going to help accelerate. So of course, there's a little bit of the inequity that's still in place. So that's something that needs to be addressed. But at least things that we can do as female professionals to close that gap even more is to own our voice in this. I can't tell you the amount of times, Kamara, that I'll speak with a female professional and they're not taking that proactive control.
Mm-hmm.
They're really relying on their work to speak for itself. They're so focused in the day-to-day that they're not seeing that bigger picture, or they're missing key exposure or visibility moments, or they might not be building up the right kind of personal brand or support system that I mentioned earlier that can help. And I'm not saying by default men do this better, but I have seen it even in my own career where sometimes they are just a little bit more noticed or recognized. So as a female professional, it's important that we know that we have the power to change this. It's in all of us, and being proactive, really having those dialogues, it's absolutely possible. And I see it every day with people I work with that are really crushing their goals in record time, as Kamara mentioned at the beginning. And it's just by putting the right steps into place. Mindset is a huge factor here, right? You need to believe that you can do this at confidence level, right? And sometimes from female professionals, the trend that we can see is that we kind of take ourselves out of the race, or we don't believe we're as ready as we actually are, or it's the imposter syndrome that's kicking in where maybe I do need to stay in this role a little bit longer, taking a bit more of that passive approach. So it's not really, again, this general trend, but there's these nuances that tend to be more common amongst female professionals that's likely playing into that gap outside of the inequality piece that's still present in several industries, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. There certainly is bias in many forms throughout many company or organizations and industries. It's nice to hear though that there's still a lot as women that we can control and empower ourselves with
100%.
in order to move the needle closer towards getting a promotion. So thank you.
100%.
That's very inspiring to hear.
Yes.
And to your point, Sweta mentioned women doubt themselves unless they're like 100% ready for a job.
Yeah.
They doubt that they are even equipped to do it. And
it's the mindset piece. The men just say, hey, I'm ready. And I've been in this role for 3 months and I'm ready to go to my next step. Women, sometimes we feel that we need to really see something through the whole fruits of our labor, or we trust in the process a little bit too much. And by the way, everything I'm saying, I'm also guilty of. I used to fall into all of these same things too. And then I had a major wake-up call where I realized, okay, this is not going to work out so well. So I definitely am speaking firsthand too. It's not at all a critique. It's more just realizations. And having pushed through it, I see the power of pushing through, and that mindset, that self-doubt, that confidence level is critical to know that, hey, yeah, maybe I am going to still have things to learn in this new promotion. Maybe I'm going to have a pretty steep learning curve, but know that you can do it and trust in yourself. And especially if you don't believe in yourself, it's going to be hard for the decision makers to believe that you can do it too, right? So you have a big say in controlling that narrative, and it all starts with that mindset piece.
Such a great point. Such a great point. That confidence is what is compelling and what is convincing, right? So
yes,
that's I'm so glad you brought that up. We have a multi-part question that came in from Michael, which I think is really interesting, because it sounds like he's asking about the other side of the promotion, the person advocating for the promotion or granting the promotion. So Michael first said, this is a complex issue. As part of a past leadership team and want to promote someone, you get pushback from other leaders. So this goes back to multiple decision makers. And more so pushback on personality, not accomplishments from the person you want to promote. As leader, and you've been a people leader yourself, how do you better frame up this conversation?
Yeah. So part of it can be making sure your own team gets the proper exposure that they need, because it sounds like in these kinds of situations, there's a certain perception that is being created for your team members or your employees. And that perception might not be the reality that you want or that employee wants to project, but it's there. So this is where that course correcting needs to happen, especially if you're getting the sense that it's more like personality based, which is not always an ideal sign, because it shouldn't even be about that. But again, a perception is a perception. So as the leader, as the manager of that team, I would encourage you or challenge you to really determine what are better ways I can give this employee the right type of exposure and visibility to correct that perception. For instance, and I've lived this too, I've seen it many a time where, maybe my boss thinks I'm ready and they're going to bat for me. And then my VP still thinks I need to work on XYZ. And that actually happened to me in my career, which blocked one of my promotions. And I was so confused. My boss was even confused because they're like, no, the business case is there. I don't understand. And so really getting a sense as to where those blockage points are happening and understanding and asking those other leaders where those blocking points are, it's going to give you the proper insight as their manager to know, okay, as a next step, these are the things that we should be working on together, or let me get you exposed in XYZ area, or maybe you should actually speak directly with this individual so they can see firsthand all of the amazing things that you've been doing. And sometimes it could be as simple as a change of a change as that, where you let them take the front seat in maybe presenting in a meeting, or you let them take a lead in a certain area so that that other decision maker can actually see the true colors that you see every day as their direct manager.
Oh, I love that. That's such great insight.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Michael? Let us know if you have any follow-up questions. I love that. That's great. And really that advice works for the person who wants to get promoted as well. Like thinking of speaking of those gaps that you've mentioned a few times, like filling those gaps, bridging those gaps. What gaps do I have in my skill sets in terms of them as a perception with the key decision makers where I need to beef it up or kind of showcase what I haven't showcased before? Mm-hmm.
It's a big part of it, right? And your manager definitely has a role to play because they also know the hierarchy. They know who has more say. They know who those key decision makers are, who's the one that's going to pull a little bit more weight. So you also want to be able to frame things in a way that's going to speak their language, right? So as much as promotions and the theme of tonight, I will tell you that communication is critical in all things work, all things career success, especially in managing up in this way, right? You can't just expect as the manager to say, okay, I know my team is ready. I'm going to just go for this and just expect it to happen. Also, it all trickles upwards. So if you go and put in the request for your team member to get a promotion, but no one else that's a deciding factor in this really sees what you've seen because you haven't necessarily taken the proactivity with your team to give them that kind of visibility or whatnot, that's only going to work against them. And so you don't want to then lead that to have a very demotivated team or a frustrated team or team that's confused as to why they're not progressing in the way that they want. So it really does go both ways.
Great. Yeah. Fantastic. All right. And so this leads us into, I think, an area where many of us are frustrated around promotions, and that's why we're passed over for a promotion. Whether we ask, whether we don't ask, like what are the most common reasons that you see in your work for reasons that people are passed over for promotions they feel they're entitled to?
Yeah. Okay. A few, I would say, and I mentioned one of this a little bit before around expecting our work to speak for itself, that, we're doing so well in our job, we're delivering or even exceeding expectations, we're generally getting good feedback. So we think that's it. When in reality, there's a lot of other things that matter, like your personal brand, building that up really effectively, getting the right type of exposure, having the right support system, self-advocating effectively, right? These are all different things that actually go far beyond just doing good work. That's one key thing that often leads to promotions being passed over for someone. Another is also trusting in the system a little bit too much or taking a passive approach, right? It goes to what I was saying about those internal timelines, that even if you get those timelines, don't take it at face value. See what you can do to help get there sooner than later, right? That's still a good way of framing it so that you're not leaving any stone unturned. Another huge one, and I'd say this is typically more prominent amongst professional females and might tie into the stat you mentioned before, Kamara, is that we don't advocate enough for our own wins. And I'll give a concrete example here, which I'm curious for all the females that are tuning in tonight, if they've been guilty of this. I know I've certainly been guilty of this, but speaking about our accomplishments as we versus I, or attributing too much to the team, and that the team did this or we did this, instead of really bringing the credit to you. And I mean, you could see how detrimental that is when you're not taking that proper credit, because you are the one that's being evaluated for a promotion, not the whole team. So if you're not giving that proper distinction, it's going to be very hard for someone to go to bat for you as well. And then I would say the fourth one that also ties with that stat a little bit is that we can stay in our comfort zone instead of really seeking opportunities that might provide the right exposure or the right type of professional challenge. And again, feeling in your comfort zone, it's comfortable, hence the comfort zone, but any type of real professional growth is going to feel very uncomfortable. So if you're feeling too comfortable, chances are it's not working in your favor to get towards that promotion faster. It's probably that you're not challenging yourself enough to focus on the right areas that's going to make the biggest difference.
Love it. And to your point about speaking in like, we did this, the team did this. I even get that a lot in my work where I am trying to market the person for their next big adventure. And I will hear so frequently, like, I can't take credit for that. That was a team thing. Yes, you can take credit for your contribution.
Absolutely. And I even have a tip for everyone who's tuning in that will really help you in having that kind of distinction. And I would say this is particularly important when you become a people manager, right? Because as a people manager, even for you getting promoted to your next step, a big part of what you're being evaluated on is your team. So I get this a lot. And I know that was a big struggle I had of distinguishing between my team and me. And so one question that you can ask yourselves to really help with that distinction is, what wouldn't have happened if I wasn't there? So what wouldn't have happened if I wasn't there? And this is directly going to help you distinguish between, okay, what are the things that really are attached to me? What are the things that my team did, executed, follow through on, whatever that is? And that can even apply to extended team members, support team members, things like that. But this is going to help you bring that focus to what you've actually done that wouldn't have even happened if you weren't on the team, or if you weren't leading the team, if you weren't managing the team. So I hope that helps everyone as well, especially if they fall into that same trap of the we versus I in not advocating enough for our own wins.
That's really good. What wouldn't have happened if I wasn't there?
Yeah. It's one of my favorite questions.
Yeah. That's really, really, that really, really brings a lot of clarity. And when I'm talking to my clients about their accomplishments on their resumes, often it goes back to taking credit for what happened under your leadership. Because I think a lot of people get stuck in the execution part. Well, like, my team executed, therefore it's a team accomplishment. Well, that's the execution part. What about the strategic part beforehand, the planning part before then, that you were a part of? How about the overseeing part? You led,
absolutely. So, maybe it's even, processes that you put in place or improvements that you made to help the workflow of the team that's helped them to achieve the results that they have, right? So don't even discount just the result part, or I should say, don't discount the process part that might have helped get to that final outcome. So this is also about peeling back the layers of that accomplishment and dissecting it a little bit more, so that you're not leaving anything on the table or left to be assumed that you could have better controlled.
Yeah. Fantastic. We're getting more questions, so I want to circle back. One question is from Sweta. She asked, nope, that's not the question. Sorry. There's the question. She said, what should you do? And I think we touched on this very, very early, but just for everyone who's just joined us more recently, what would you do, or what should you do if your boss doesn't think you're ready to be promoted?
Yeah.
If their perception.
Absolutely. So it's a bit that perception factor where you might think you're ready. They, for whatever reason, don't think you're ready. So it's about asking the right questions. And this also goes to the point earlier as to why it's so important to have a continuity of dialogue, because imagine, Sweta, if this is happening only in a performance review when you're learning new things for the first time that you actually could have already actioned months prior. So I think you're getting a feel as to why I'm a big advocate for that. But if, let's say, they don't feel you're ready, asking them, what is it that you believe I'm missing to get there? Or are there certain areas of focus that would help me better position my readiness level in your view to help me get there by a certain time frame? So just always know that if it's a no for now, it's not a no for never. That is a mantra I live by. And you always want to be in control of that and take more proactivity. So getting to the bottom as to why they don't think you're ready is critical, obviously. And if you're getting surface level feedback, which happens often, I don't think you're ready yet, or I need to still see more from you, or, don't worry, it's going to happen. Whatever they kind of say, that's not good enough in my books. You need to probe further and really understand where are those areas that are going to be most significant in making that judgment call. And it could even be also going beyond your boss too, right? Maybe it's other people that need to recognize this as well, but you're absolutely right, Sweta, that it's typically your boss that's putting in the request or really vouching for you first and foremost. So until you get their buy-in, it's going to be hard to get other people's buy-ins in that regard. So asking the questions, probe. And even if they give you an answer that seems somewhat concrete, but you're still confused as to exactly what does that mean, probe further. This is going to give you the proper roadmap moving forward so that okay, now I'm clear that if I deliver on this, that's going to position me better. And it's going to help you hold them accountable so that as you're delivering on that, you can't just come and say, oh, well, you didn't do that. No, I did. I've taken this to heart. And that's why that continuity of dialogue is helpful so that you can show that evolution that you've been doing with that feedback.
Fantastic. That's so great. We've got some comments coming in as well that I just want to touch on. Our audience is finding what you're saying very relatable, particularly your comment about women kind of downplaying their accomplishments. And Kimberly said, yeah, same. Very relatable. Yeah. And Summer just wanted to say she loved your question about the
what wouldn't have happened if I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Summer.
So that's great. Sriya is asking, I think what's being asked is, will a promotion be awarded to a person who's been working in the same profession for more than 2 years? What are your thoughts on that? You put in the time, promotion?
It really depends. I mean, I've seen it happen where people have stayed in their role much longer than 2 years and still had very stagnant growth. I've seen people get promoted much shorter than that. So again, a big thing is understanding what does it take to get you from your point A to point B. And this is going to vary across functions, across industries, across companies. So it goes a little back to those internal politics and understanding what those inner workings are. But don't just take it as a general rule of thumb that if I'm in a role for 2 years, then I'm guaranteed my promotion. You need to get that validation. You need to understand, okay, is what I'm doing going to help me get to that next step? And with where I'm at to where I want to go, what are the skill sets that I need to focus on? Maybe what are the things that I can be doing that's going to really help me get there by that timeline, if not sooner? So don't just take a timeline as a rule of thumb, overarching rule. Really try to understand what's keeping you from getting there. And it's not to say that it will happen tomorrow, but at least you're going to get a good sense that, for instance, I'll give a quick example of, let's say, to get into your next role that does require people management. In your current role, you need to show some kind of level of people management. Then maybe it's about asking to have an intern on your team that you can oversee, or maybe it's about mentoring the new hires that come on your team, right? To show that softer skill, that would be a good requirement to get to that next step. But it's going to be very hard to know what's required if you don't have those proper dialogues and questions asked. So it's not actually just about timeline. It's also about what needs to be demonstrated to get you there by a certain timeline.
That's a great point. And this is for a totally other office hours episode, but I think sometimes some of us are afraid to ask for where the gaps are or what we need to improve upon or develop. Because either we have kind of like past trauma, even I would call it, from being provided feedback poorly or just in a toxic way, or your leader's just bad at giving feedback, doesn't want to give feedback. But that's a totally different different live episode.
No, but you know what, Kamara, you bring up a really good point, because sometimes, if let's say you're scared of getting that feedback, and I get that, you know, especially if you're kind of scared, what am I really going to learn? Like, what if it's something I don't want to hear? I'll give you this different frame of perspective, which is, well, wouldn't you rather know versus not? Because just because you're not asking doesn't mean that that person, if it's your boss or someone else, they're not thinking it. So by not asking for the feedback, you're not giving yourself the chance to action it. So you're actually hurting yourself. You're doing yourself a disservice. So that's just a mindset shift that I find is so important when it comes to asking for feedback and seeing it in more of how can this benefit me versus how is it going to work against me. Absolutely fair though what you bring up. If let's say you've had past bosses or whatnot who were terrible at feedback or were very, reprimanded you for things or took things too personally, whatever that might be, know that that doesn't have to dictate your future. Your past never has to dictate your future. And this is why I'm such a big advocate of helping you take proactive control in your career growth, because there's so much power that comes from that. And I never want these past managers or bosses to take that power away from you. They don't have the right to implicate how your future growth is going to look. This is for you to take that control back. So I hope that helps if anyone identifies with that point. It's an important one for sure.
It helps me. I don't really love asking for feedback all the time. And so although I get a lot of unsolicited feedback on YouTube, that's for sure. But anyway, so
the unsolicitors, oh my gosh, I know they can be wild sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny. I have to laugh, and I've developed a thick skin now, so it's all good. But when I was in corporate, I didn't ask for feedback because I was afraid of what people thought of me. I suppose it is, but I love how you reframed it in that just because you're not being told this feedback doesn't mean that it's not being thought by, or it's not part of the person's perception 100%. Of you. And so you might as well just like air it out and get on with it. As you said, action it. So great points. And another question that kind of ties in with kind of like standards around promotional practices. Does more education often weigh into a promotion?
I love that question. It's definitely a hot topic, and I'll share my viewpoint, at least from what I've seen from my work experience over 13 years and a lot of professionals that I've worked with over this time. It's not, again, a one size fits all model. So part of it is understanding within your role, within your function, within your company, let's say this is a place you want to grow, or even the industry that you want to grow in, is that advanced degree something that's a non-negotiable, or is it a nice to have? I'll give you just a personal example. When I started my corporate career, I was dead set convinced that I needed to do an MBA. I was like, it has to happen for me to be able to advance in the way that I wanted. And sure enough, a few years in, I realized that I was learning so much. I was growing so much through the practical experience that I was getting and through internal conversations I had around the growth path that I would have at my company. I realized that it wasn't actually like even close to a requirement. I saw amazing leaders in my organization that had their, bachelor degree, and that was it. And yes, I went later on to get a business certification at MIT, but it was more out of, my initiative. It wasn't necessarily something that I felt that I needed to advance. So it's really a personal thing to know also, is it something that's going to be that non-negotiable, and asking the right questions, talking with people in your career path that are a few steps ahead, asking people who have that degree versus who don't have that degree, if it's something that they found has really helped them or not. Because of course, doing any advanced degree, it's a time commitment, it's an investment. And from my own experience, from what I've seen, that practical experience you can gain in that time can be very valuable towards your next steps, because it shows, hey, I've concretely done what is needed to get to that next step in terms of growth. Whereas when you're doing a degree, yes, it's great for a lot of things, including networking and just being exposed into a lot of different areas, but it won't necessarily give you that concrete practical experience that can make the difference.
Such a good point. I also too was like, I'm going to do my MBA. I was thinking that it was going to be required of me if I was continuing in corporate. And I'm glad I didn't, because it was so expensive. And and then I went this direction, and I really didn't need it. So.
No.
so expensive. Like some of them are so
Yeah.
expensive. But anyway, props to anyone who does their MBA or advanced
Oh,
degree.
yeah. And some
Yeah.
people love it, right? Some people just love
Yeah.
school. And that's why I'm
Yeah.
saying it's such a personal decision, because if you just
Totally.
genuinely want to do it, then more power to you. Go for it.
Yeah.
My point is more just make sure, if you're doing it for the sake of career progression, that it really is a needed requirement that's going to make a difference. And then weigh your options if that's worth it versus getting the practical experience instead.
Right. For sure. For sure. And speaking of money, things being expensive, MBA, and money, what about raises?
Mhm.
Like, are promotions like, could you get a promotion without a raise? Would you even want to?
Mm.
And like, how do you just ask for a raise?
Yeah. Okay. This is good. Let's break that down in a few parts. So,
Yeah.
generally, my school of thought is any promotion is a great opportunity to negotiate for a raise,
Mm,
especially a vertical promotion. I would say, Kamara, sometimes where there's that gray zone is if it's a lateral promotion
mhm,
where it's not technically perceived as a vertical jump. So it's maybe
mm,
developing a different skill set, maybe moving to a different team. So that's sometimes where you'll get pushback around an actual monetary change in terms of salary. But regardless, it's always important to negotiate when you have a promotion at hand. It actually facilitates the conversation because generally, any type of promotion, even laterally, if you spin it the right way, which I love supporting on, is that you can find those inner gems that are going to help you have that right anchor and leverage to
mm.
go for that salary raise. And especially if you're leveraging the right data, the right benchmarks in terms of what that role goes for in the market, you're almost doing yourself a disservice by not negotiating and just taking on new responsibilities
Yeah.
and expecting to keep at that same salary for, I don't know, another year or 2 years. So
Yeah.
always negotiate. You have nothing to lose. And I would add this other point too, that when it comes to promotions, your company is already valuing you, right? They already want you
Mm,
for that next step. They've seen your track record. They believe in you. So why wouldn't you want to negotiate, right? They already
yeah.
know that you are the talent they want. It's
Right.
very unlikely that they're going to take away a promotion from you because you're asking about the salary or compensation or maybe bonus structure or whatever it is that's tied going into that next role. So
Right.
definitely use that as a negotiation opportunity. I would say maybe, Kamara, the reverse is a little different where let's say you just want a salary raise not tied to a promotion. That's where there's definitely a few different nuances there, but you absolutely can still negotiate, whether it's come time for year end appraisals, or if let's say you've taken on a lot of new responsibilities in your existing role and maybe for whatever reason the promotion is not happening as of yet, but you still believe you should be compensated better than what you have been,
Mhm.
use that as an opportunity for a raise as well. Because the worst that's
Mm,
going to happen is you're going to get pushback. Maybe you'll get a no, but again, I go back to my mantra that if it's a no for now, it's not a no for never. So use that as
mm.
the gateway to find out what is missing for you to secure that higher raise and then work towards that to be able to secure it sooner than later.
That's great advice. And Sweater made me laugh. She said a promotion without a raise is a scam.
It's a scam. I know, right? They're trying to cheat you. They're
Yeah.
trying, don't fall for it. I mean,
Yeah. And
it's
yeah.
not
So
fun.
yeah. And honestly, they're giving someone a promotion and a little bit of a salary raise is going to save is still going to save the company money than having to go to market and hire someone completely new.
Yeah, 100%.
So
That's why use these types of things as that leverage, right? And although I can't give a specific figure as to what a raise should be for a promotion, because it really depends by industry, by function, by organization. Typically, you want to go for at least a double-digit percent raise. Like
mm,
the 3%, the 4%, the 5% tied with a promotion is not really a raise tied to the promotion. It's partially the inflation, maybe a little bit
yeah.
of a top up. So just know that too, if you feel like you're getting a little bit lowballed there, there's likely more wiggle room to push.
That's a great reminder. So that's excellent. Um, just another question. This goes back to what you were mentioning around exposure, like getting the right visibility. So how would someone get to know the right decision makers and make sure that they're getting the visibility they need while also accounting for the fact that they're an introvert?
Oh yeah. I love this question too. I work with a lot of introverts, and I know sometimes that outreach can feel a little bit overwhelming as to, where do I start, or how do I even initiate those conversations? I would say two things. The first is start smaller, right? When we talk about upper management, that could seem like a mountain to climb. So maybe as an initial step, it's your boss's boss, and getting, more in the know with them. And then likely they're going to be a decision maker because they're evaluating the overall team, right? And then from there, you can maybe branch out to other individuals at that same level, but don't feel like you have to do, 20 different network connections at once. That's probably going to really intimidate and maybe even affect the type of effectiveness you'll have in building those relationships. But to the question of how do I get to know them, or how do I know who they are, or get to know them, try to implicate yourself in areas or activities where they're involved. So I'm going to give just a really quick concrete example, right? Let's say your CEO hosts a town hall meeting, I don't know, once a year or every quarter, and there's options to ask questions. Then maybe as an introvert, if you don't feel as confident, as an example of asking an impromptu question, try to think of a question ahead of the town hall, something that you have a feeling would pretty much be a good gauge. And then as you're listening to the town hall, maybe tweak it. And then you'll feel a lot more confident to ask that question, especially if it's a company-wide type of setting and you're the one that's asking that question. Trust me, they're going to pick up on that. They're going to see that boldness, that courage, that confidence coming through. And it's one of those micro moments that can really go a long way to then possibly lead to maybe a follow-up dialogue that you have with them directly on how you appreciated that town hall or something that really stood out to you. So that's just kind of some ideas of how to forge those connections. But when in doubt of who those decision makers are, it's a great thing to discuss with your boss and get a good feel of, in terms of your progression, who are people that you should maybe get more in touch with or get exposed to that will help ensure that progression happens in the way that you want it to.
That's such a great, it is memorable to be the person to ask a question at a town hall. So that's really, really great. I love that. Okay. So we're nearing time. So I want to make sure I ask you this very important question. How did you get your 7 promotions in 10 years? Like, what was the secret sauce, the secret ingredients?
Oh my gosh. There's quite a few, and I these are the things that I love supporting and coaching on as well, but I'll break it down to like the 4 key things that are my staples.
Great.
Mindset, huge. We talked about that a lot tonight. It was, especially that confidence, you might gather this from me now, but when I was earlier in my career, I looked very young. I was short. I felt like, that level to be taken serious needed like 10 extra efforts from me every single day. And so I put a lot of pressure on my shoulders, and that created a lot of self-doubt or imposter syndrome along the way. I was surrounded by so many experienced professionals, so that really got the best of me. And I realized that was preventing me from creating my own lane for success. I was getting so caught up in the surrounding environment that it was directly diminishing my mindset and my confidence. So when I had that flip switch where I said, okay, that mindset is going to be one of my biggest assets, I need to focus on that. That's definitely step 1. The second was realizing the importance of having a really solid personal brand. And that doesn't just go down to what really sets you apart and how to leverage that in every area of your work, but also very much on the relationship building and how that can go such a long way in getting those right supporters in your corner. I can tell you, Kamara, that of those 7 promotions, 2 of them came without me even asking for it. They came to me proactively because of that support system, that people wanted me on their team when my own boss didn't even want me to go yet. So that's what I mean when those timelines, when you get the typical 2-year timeline, don't just take, a book by its cover. There's more to it than that. So that would be the second thing. The third thing is communication. Oh my gosh. Communication, whether we're talking about self-advocating, owning your wins, and also leading with empathy and kindness. You would be surprised at how far that goes in just fueling trust and credibility in the character that you're establishing for yourself, and being a really effective speaker in all work settings, right? Being able to articulate your points, getting the buy-in. So there's a lot of facets to communication, but that I would say that's definitely been one of my strengths that's really helped me to accelerate my growth and what I coach on specifically as well. And then the fourth and final, that might be a bit of a surprise, that's really helped me is work-life balance and well-being. Because I never want anyone, especially everyone tuning in tonight, to think that, you know, for me to be able to accelerate my growth or advance at a certain level, that my well-being has to be compromised, or that it's either my career or my personal life. And, you know, I'm a mom of 2 young kids. So, you know, I've gone through that same rationale of, you know, what if I get out of the workforce for a year or 2? What is that going to do for my growth and all of that? But just know that you have to protect your well-being, and you have to protect your personal priorities, because if you don't do that, it's going to be very hard to show up effectively in your work. And I can tell you that for me, in putting that first and really coming up with the right methods to best orient and manage my time towards what makes the difference, that's what's actually helped me to thrive in my career and still very much protect my well-being, which wasn't always the case, especially at the start, where that was almost non-existent. So those I would say are really my 4 core drivers, Kamara, that really made the difference for me.
That's great. Yeah, we all need that reminder for the well-being, because I think a lot of us, especially ambitious professionals who you work with, can really fall into the workaholism lifestyle.
Yeah.
So
100%.
it's easy to do, to fall into that. So focusing on your own wellness, very important. And speaking of the type of clients who you work with, who do you really like to work with, and what program are you offering right now?
Yeah, so I primarily work with ambitious professionals from all different backgrounds. I would say primarily corporate backgrounds or company backgrounds, but I do support clients in other industries, because the methods I coach on are very transversal to ultimately set you up for success and dive into all the things that school never taught us that make the difference beyond just being a really good and strong performer. So ultimately, I work with ambitious professionals at all stages of their career, whether early stage, mid stage, later stage. And I would say the common denominator, Kamara, is that they want to accelerate their growth. They want to take control of their career. They want to build up their confidence. They want to be able to land their goals a lot sooner than later. And those are a lot of the common themes that I see with my clients coming through, that they want to become the best version of themselves. And like I was saying earlier, my distinction is the fact that I've gone through it all myself. So they really appreciate the level of empathy and understanding I bring in my coaching style, because it's not theory. It's actually tried, tested, and proven methods that I've done, that my teams have done, and now that my clients are doing from around the world to set themselves up best. So that's typically, I would say, the type of client that I'm working with, versus when I started, which was a little bit of a different scope versus what it is now. And I would say the program that really supports, especially with everything we talked about tonight, is my signature program called Career Success Fast Track. So the name probably gives it away, but it's where I really walk through my proven 4-step framework, step by step, with all of the how behind everything. So there's no guesswork. It's a very less is more focused approach, which took me a lot of time to refine back over my 13 years to know what is it that's really going to make the difference, so that you can hit the ground running and be set up for the most success.
Awesome. And where can folks follow you? Where can they best follow you?
Oh, well, definitely on LinkedIn. If we have a lot of LinkedIn users tonight, please follow me over, Tiffany Uman, Career Strategy Coach. If you're also more active on other platforms like Instagram or TikTok, my handle is the same on both, at tiffany.uman. And feel free, if you want to check out my site, you'll be able to get in touch with me there as well. It's www.tiffanyuman.com.
Fantastic. And I have linked Tiffany's LinkedIn, her website, and her Instagram in the description of this video on YouTube. Particularly, I recommend heading over to Tiffany's Instagram. I haven't gone to your TikTok. I will need to go there too. But I love your reels on Instagram. They are
Thank
great.
you.
They are light and fun and just wonderful. So if you guys like Instagram reels, check them out. They're
Thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate that.
Awesome. And I will have to go grab your TikTok and I'll put it in the description too. So that's so great. Well, thank you so much, Tiffany, for all the insights that you've shared tonight. Super valuable. I learned a lot and I know everyone else did. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're so welcome, Kamara. And thank you for having me. This has been so much fun. Thank you for
My
everyone
pleasure.
tuning in and taking an hour of your time with us. I hope you all found it helpful.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you again very soon. Take care.
Bye.